Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I am really grateful to have this opportunity to interview Dr. Constance Scharff, who has a PhD in Transformative Studies with a specialty in radically transformative personal experience. Constance, also known by her Hebrew name, Ahuva Batcha, is an internationally recognized speaker and author on the topics of addiction and trauma recovery, the psychological impacts of climate change, and women's mental health. She is the founder of the Institute for Complementary and Indigenous Mental Health Research with a passion for working with mental health professionals using a wide range of practices that improve treatment outcomes. She also works to eliminate the stigma that is too often associated with addiction, trauma, and other mental health issues. And in 2019, she received St. Lawrence University's Saul Feinstein Humanitarian Award. Constance's books include her award-winning Rock to Recovery, Music as a Catalyst for Human Transformation. There it is. The Amazon #1 best-selling Ending Addiction for Good, and the award-winning poetry book Meeting God at Midnight. Her debut novel, The Path to God's Promise, examines issues of faith, self-determination, and our power to transform both our lives and literally to change the world. And I must say, I'm intuiting that there's another interview with Constance one day in our future about the path to God's promise, but that's it to be continued. I'm looking forward to talking with Constance, who lives in Washington State, about her path to healing after suffering extreme childhood sexual abuse, which led to alcoholism and post-traumatic stress, how trauma gets us stuck in the past, the healing transformative effect of music on the brain, complementary practices that can improve well-being, and so much more. This is surely going to be an insightful and unforgettable interview with a truly remarkable woman. So, hi, Constance. A very warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you.
You are. There's so much to you, and I'm really looking forward to sharing you with our audience.
Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Yeah.
So let's start with that horrific childhood story of yours that began just before you turned 7 years old. And would you please describe your father and his extreme childhood sexual abuse of you?
Yeah. So I was, as a child, I was a daddy's girl, and so, and my dad didn't really pay a lot of attention to my brother, who's 2.5 years younger than I am. So it was not unusual for my mom to take my brother with her on errands and leave me at home on our ranch. So we were on a ranch in the Central Valley of California. We were very, very isolated. And my mother and brother actually went to town to get a birthday cake for my 7th birthday party, which we always would have had the party on the weekend. So I think my birthday was on a Tuesday or whatever. But anyway, while they were in town, my father and I were watching cartoons. And that's when he sexually assaulted me, raped me for the first time. And it was a shocking experience because I had no idea what was happening. And I was so young and small. Keep in mind, my father was a very, very large man. He was about probably 300,
God,
350
and you're like
pounds.
this tiny little girl.
And I was this tiny little girl. And so what happened in the assault was, first of all, I dissociated. I left my body because the pain was so great, but also I couldn't breathe. He was so much heavier that, once I exhaled for the first time, no more air could come in. So in addition to the assault, I was literally dying. I was suffocating. So I flew out the window. My spirit flew out the window, and I had from the second that I dissociated, I have no recollection of anything physical. And I remember after the assault was over, because of course it's very quick. After the assault was over, he got up and left. And I remember flying back and looking at the dead little girl in the bed and making a choice. I'm going to go back in. So I didn't realize it until much later, but I made a choice there to live. I remember almost nothing of the next 3 years.
Did he accost you often?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest. What I remember some very fuzzy things, most of them having nothing to do with him. But what I do remember is my mother, my mother, at the end of their relationship, my mother and father, I was 10. My mother and father were trying to save the marriage. My father insisted on having an open marriage, and he had a girlfriend who was a prostitute. And when my mother, who was a school teacher, went to school to teach, she came over because, of course, she worked at night. So she came over. And I remember she came over on a Tuesday or Wednesday, some weekday. And I was washing my sheets before school, which, of course, 10-year-olds don't wash their sheets before school on a weekday. That's not how the world works. And she, saw what had happened, right? The evidence. And she said, she looked me in the eye. This is 1982.
This is your mother? Or
this is the prostitute.
Whoa.
She looks me in the eye and she said, he will never touch you again. So the woman who has probably the least power in our culture, and certainly in my home, I don't know what she said to him. I threw my sheets in the washer and went to school. That's where my memory picks up again. So I can tell you he assaulted me at least twice, that first time and that last time. In the middle, I couldn't tell you. And I've never tried to recover those. I have no need to recover those memories. Twice is enough, right? But my memory picks up at that point because I don't know what she said to him, but he never touched me again.
And it's amazing to me that he did not. I mean, he was so damaged, obviously. He didn't know better. I mean, wow.
I think this is my suspicion. I think I was just available. I don't think he was truly a pedophile. Because when he could have sex with adult women, that's what he chose. So that's just my feeling.
He had a shtick about sex, though. That was obvious.
Well, I think he wanted what he wanted, and he wanted someone who couldn't say no to him. I have a feeling my mom said no to him a lot. I don't know that. That's my suspicion, because when he wanted, threesomes and open marriage and all that, my mom was like, nope. And the open marriage was extremely brief. It was a few months, and she was like, I'm gone. I'm not doing this.
Yeah, that's understandable. When you had that disassociative experience,
yeah.
Did you feel yourself lift up out of your head, or can you remember what that was like? Because I once left my body. I've left my body a couple of times also. What was that like for you?
Well, when you have that kind of experience that young, it becomes second nature. I can leave my body at will. And I don't anymore because I'm supposed to be in this body. But I would say for most of my life, I mean, I was just out, and all of a sudden I'm in the tree outside the window looking in. And that body has no relationship to me. I do not recognize that as me. I'm like, wow, that little girl looks sad. Oh, she looks dead. Like there was no relationship there that
Wow.
was my body. But what I did have for the whole, until I really started doing somatic work and try finally inhabiting my body, is I was always like way back. Like I would see you like from way back here behind my eyes. And I didn't feel a lot from, sort of the neck down, or the middle of my
Yeah.
sinuses down, right? Like I was very much inhabiting this space, or I would be up here in therapy a lot. I'd be sort of up above, a little bit behind, observing. And my
Because it was
therapist would,
too, it was too painful to be
it was too
feeling.
painful. That's the thing. So I'm 51. I was born in 1972. And when I got sober in the mid 1990s, there was not good treatment for trauma. There just wasn't. And so getting sober was very difficult. So it really wasn't until 2005, 2010 that we really started to get much better treatment for in the West. There has been treatment in other traditions, but not in the West.
Right. I mean, I hear now people going to rehab and all of that, but I don't know if they had it all those years ago.
Well, there was rehab, certainly. We called it the $30,000 big book. So you basically went for 28 to 30 days and you did a 12-step program in rehab. And then you went to sober living. What was good about it is it was structured and it was longer than what it is now. There are lots of problems with what happens in rehab now. So there was rehab.
What kinds of problems happen in rehab now?
Well, because we have a for-profit medical system. So insurance increasingly is not letting people stay 28 to 30 days when we've known for more than 40 years that people need longer term structured care. Mostly people get a detox and then they have to go down, which is 7 to 14 days, depending on whatever. Then you drop down to IOP, intensive outpatient programming, right? So you go to outpatient, and then you have to fail out of that in order to go back into residential care if you can't pay. And failing out, though, very often means a relapse.
Of course.
But if you've been detoxed, that is the most likely time to die, because your body is no longer accustomed to the amount of substance you were using. You've been detoxed. So it's great for insurance companies because then the people die and they don't have to pay for them to be in treatment anymore.
Wow, 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 wow. Constance, tell me what it was like when you were 11 years old, you had your first drink. Since we're talking about rehab, let's get back to the beginning. How did you, all right, you're in tremendous pain. You're 11 years old. You don't know what's up or what's down. You're not talking to your mother about this. You've disassociated, right?
Yep.
And now what happens?
So my parents divorced and my mother moved with my brother and I up to rural Oregon. So we lived in the Willamette Valley and on a little farm in a little single wide, rusted out trailer, and that eventually actually burned down. But my mother did not drink, not a drinker. But we always had a little bit of alcohol in the house, in case somebody came over, and my mother occasionally, like once or twice a year, she'd go crazy and have a screwdriver and probably drink half of it, like that was it just wasn't her thing. Anyways, but I intuitively knew that alcohol would help me. And I was so overwhelmed by trauma symptoms, just intruding all the time. And
like
I was out,
like, what were you feeling? What kind of symptoms were you having?
hypervigilance, body memories, dissociation, a lot of just overwhelming fear and anxiety. I felt like someone was always coming. I could feel my father breathing on my neck, a lot of the time, like, like just like an Alien, where the alien comes out at Sigourney Weaver and is like, that's what it felt like, just, like, ooh, right there. So intuitively, I just knew that alcohol was going to help. So I was out in the barn doing my chores. I'm 11 years old. And I walked into the house and I got all the bottles down. They were up over the refrigerator. I mean, it wasn't even easy, right? I got all the bottles down and I poured a little bit out of every bottle into a tall glass. So I must have had, I don't know, 4 or 5 shots. I mean, a lot of liquor for a little kid. And I stood over the sink and plugged my nose and drank it down. It was disgusting. And I was immediately absolutely drunk. I mean, very, very drunk. And I rinsed the glass out and I went back to the barn and I laid in the hay and the world is spinning and I didn't feel anything. And I thought, this is what I want for the rest of my life. And I drank every opportunity I had. And I wasn't probably truly an alcoholic until I got to college because we lived so far out in a rural area that, you couldn't get alcohol every day. You couldn't get to, but I would, my stepfather, he liked beer. And so occasionally there'd be some beer left over from some, barbecue or something that we'd have. And I would take the beer and pour it into a Tupperware container so I wouldn't get caught, right, with a beer can. Pour it into a Tupperware container, take it on the school bus. I mean, it's, an hour into school, right? Take it on the school bus and then drink the flat, warm beer on the breaks. I mean, I was
Wow.
committed to being drunk.
And people didn't pick up that you were drunk? You were so high functioning in school and all?
Well, I'm very fortunate that I just, did very well in school. No, some of my friends did notice, and they, tried to do something about it. That, they were definitely concerned. But what can you do? One, debate where my partner and I placed in the debate team every single tournament our first year. I was, close to, I don't think I got an A in math, but I got an A in pretty much everything else, so I was nearly a straight A student and
there was nothing they could really pinpoint to. So
and I was the president of the 4-H club and the Girl Scouts. I was doing volunteering with the girl. I mean, what are they going to say? Where I'm like, no, I'm not high. I'm not drunk. Because remember, this is the 80s, so they couldn't do like a urinalysis or anything like that.
Right. But the truth but you were an alcoholic early in your college career.
Oh, the second I got to college.
Right.
Yeah, the second I got to college.
And so not only now it's all coming out, and then you have your first remarkable step towards healing, because you have this remarkable experience that brought you despair, love, respect, and also hope. When you broke into a chapel, right?
Yeah.
You want to tell everybody about that?
Yeah. So I went to St. Lawrence University. Shout out to all the Laurentians. I love my alma mater. I cannot tell you how much I love my alma mater. If you're interested in your kids are interested in going there, send them. It is, if you can get in, it's a great, great school. So what changed for me?
Where's it located?
Canton, New York. So straight north of Syracuse, 3-hour drive north of Syracuse, just a little bit south of Ottawa. It's right on the border with Canada. But what changed for me when I went to college, even though I went to a college in a rural area, it's a small town, I was no longer isolated out on the farm. It wasn't a 30-minute drive for me to go and see somebody, my debate partner lived 30 minutes on the other side of the town where we went to high school. So it was an hour drive. And then she had this big, long gravel driveway. My mother took me there once and she was like, we're never coming here. We're never coming here again because it's too far. So when I went to college and I lived in the dorms, I wasn't isolated anymore. But I didn't know what to do with myself because I'm surrounded by people who are still my good friends. I needed my little dog, my puppy was in training in New York City and he had to be picked up, and immediately something happened. He had to be picked up immediately. I called my friend Laura from, who broke into the chapel with me. And I said, please go pick up my dog. She dropped everything. She drove 3 hours from Connecticut to go get the dog, she and her daughter. And then her daughter flew him out to Seattle for me.
Wow.
So I didn't know what to do with. Here are these people who love me. They trust me. I trust them. They show up for me. I tell them, like what I've been through. They're supportive of me. I don't know what to do with that. So on Halloween, my freshman year,
Because you're receiving unconditional love for the first time in your life.
Yeah, totally. And I had people who loved me, but they weren't local to me. Like my grandparents and I were very, very close, but they lived, a 4-hour drive away.
And
Right?
you never told your grandparents or anybody what had happened to you.
No, I would never have done that to them. It would have devastated them. It would have devastated them. Because they would have. So my father was adopted, and my grandfather asked me shortly after my father died. He said, I was told that this happened. And I said, no, that's a lie, because I knew it would devastate him, because he felt like he should have gotten my father more treatment. And they tried to get him treatment from when he was a young boy, and there just wasn't anything available then. And so I didn't want my grandfather to blame himself for something that was not his fault. And so I straight up lied to his face. I was like,
but
nope,
you know
didn't
how
happen.
admirable that you did that. I mean, you were so mature and with all that you went through, and here you were worried about protecting your grandparents.
Well, because my dad was dead, and so there was nothing that anybody could do, and they were paying for my therapy anyway. So I didn't. Why make it worse? They're doing everything they could for me at that point. I was no longer in danger. Why hurt him worse for something that wasn't his fault?
Because you had angels showing up for you. You had people
all the time
showing up for you all the time.
So Halloween, we'll go back to that story because it's a great story. So Halloween, I'm really feeling very depressed, very suicidal. And I said, I want to go to the chapel, which is sort of the center, the spiritual heart of St. Lawrence University. It's the heart of the campus. Everybody loves that chapel. And the bells get played every day at 5:00. It's so beautiful. I mean, I just love to go back and hear the bells. But it's locked. I mean, you can't just go in there and, whatever. So it's, I don't know, 9-10 o'clock. It wasn't too late, but definitely dark on Halloween night. And the back door was unlocked. We went around and tried all the doors, and there's this back door, and it was unlocked. And we went in there, and my friend Laura played the organ. And then my friend Eric looked at me and he said, I just feel like there's something, not right with you. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said, I want to pray for you. And he put his hand on me, and it was like electricity. And both of us felt it. And then Laura came over, and we basically, and we're all different traditions, and we, basically just prayed together. But I felt so connected to source at that point that it was really transformative for me. I couldn't stop drinking yet, but it was
right.
It was.
But what you were tuning into was real love. I mean, and love is so healing. And that's the language of source. So I know you get through school and you're in graduate school, and now you change your focus to addiction research. Tell us about that. You're still not healed yet, right? You're still.
So at this point, I'm sober. I'm sober at this point.
How did you start getting sober then? From when they prayed for you?
Okay, so this is many years later. So I graduated in 94, and I actually started going to a 12-step program in 95, but I didn't get sober till 98. I started graduate school in 2004. So when I was in graduate school, I was sober, and I was struck sober. Because when I started to get sober, I couldn't. In 1995, I just couldn't get sober. And because there wasn't good treatment then for trauma. So when I would
still had the trauma. You were trying to heal the behavioral result of the trauma, but the root was still there.
So when I would stop drinking, the trauma symptoms would amplify to such a point I just couldn't do it. So I was mostly sober. I certainly wasn't. When I tried to get sober, I was drinking 2 liters or more of hard liquor a day. That was the bottom. And at 22 and 23 years old, I was dying. You could see my liver and kidneys, in behind, because they were so swollen. So I didn't know what to do, but I kept going back and kept trying to be sober. And I was sober most of that period with small relapses, very brief, but it's just the trauma was so bad I couldn't deal with it. So there was a man whose name was Marcel, and he was a writer. He was a novelist, and he saw me. He's like, I know what your problem is. He said, I understand, and we're just gonna, do the best we can, right? Because we're gonna get through this together.
Now,
And
how'd you meet Marcel?
in a 12-step meeting.
In the 12 step. So he was also.
He was sober. He was sober 5 years. He's funny because he was, I think, around 54 or 55 when he died, and was sober for 5 years. I'm 51 and I'm sober for over 25 years.
Wow.
When I met him, right, 23 years old, I thought he was ancient and had been sober forever. But he reminded me of what I thought my dad might have been like if he'd ever had real mental health care. Because Marcel was very difficult. He was a misogynist and a misanthrope and everything. He was always grumpy and all the things. And I just adored him. I just adored him. And he got liver cancer, a very aggressive form of liver cancer, and died very quickly. But he said to me, I need you to be sober to come to my house. And I figured I could be sober longer than he would live, which was true. But the day he died, he always believed in me. He always told me, he's like, you write. He's like, girl, you write. You are meant to be a writer. And the day he died, I was at work. And I said to him, the last time I saw him, I said, what do you want to see? And he said, he pulled off his oxygen mask, and he's like, I want to see you get 100 days sober. And I think he died when I had 102 days.
Oh.
And I didn't see him for like the last 3 or 4 days of his life because he got very, very sick, and then he went to the hospital. But he was in the hospital, and I was at work, and it was a Friday, and we had a Friday meeting that 12-step meeting that we always met at. And I felt him die. I felt when he passed. And when I was in the car, I do not know how I drove to this meeting because I was blind, crying, sobbing. And I felt him in the car. I felt his spirit in the car, and I felt him fly into me and pull the addiction out. And that's the only way I can describe it.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing, Constance.
So I describe myself as being struck sober. So after that experience, and I actually have a memorial to him. You can't see it. It's on the other wall, but I have a memorial to him.
He was like a guardian angel for you.
He was my mentor. He was very much my mentor, and I just adored him. And in fact, his estate let me have one of his leather jackets, because I was what he was wearing sort of at the end of his life. And I still have it. It's in my closet, but I wanted it because it still smelled like him. Probably smelled like him for a good year or two. I mean, now it's 25 years. It doesn't smell like him anymore. So I'm sober, but the trauma is so bad. And I'd have body memories where I'd feel that moment of assault, but it's not like a man and a woman where everything fits. I don't want to be too graphic. Where everything fits. It's a little child where you're literally being torn apart. I don't know how I lived through it, to be honest, where you're literally being torn apart. And I get that 30 or 40 times in succession. You can't live like that. You can't live like that and be sober. So I'm mildly suicidal all the time. I have terrible anxiety. No one can sit behind me. I can't do this. I can't, all these things. And, try to go to a 12-step meeting where no one can sit behind you. But my home group sits in a U shape. So there's nobody that sits up against a wall. I mean, just horrible things. So I got sober in the 90s. The veterans started, I lived in Los Angeles with my grandparents, and the veterans started coming back from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they were not getting sober. And one guy that I really, really liked, this young man, 23 years old, all he wanted to do was be a Marine, but was wounded and medically discharged. Wife, infant, child, he killed himself. And I was in grad school, and I thought, I was studying something else. And I thought, there has to be something better. There has to be better treatment out there for me, because I didn't get sober to be suicidal all the time. And these guys are not making it. And I said, I want to learn what those treatments are, because I know they exist. I want to know what those treatments are so that we really do recover. And so since then, I've dedicated, it's about, I don't know, 2005, 2006.
Amazing. Your story is so amazing.
Yeah.
So would you explain to everyone in our audience, since you do know so much about this, how does trauma get a person stuck in the past? How can a person learn to stay present? And how does staying in the present help a person experience that safety and connection that they wish for, that they desire?
So that's a 3-part question, and if I don't answer all of it, remind me the parts that I've missed.
I will.
So I don't like to use clinical terms. You won't hear me using very many clinical terms at all because I don't think they're very helpful. They're good for insurance because they tell you what to bill for, but they don't really help a person.
But you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people in our
I do know what you're saying.
A lot of people in our audience have been traumatized.
Right,
I'm a person who was
Yeah, so I'm just saying this is what you're going to hear from me. You're not going to hear this.
Right. So, that's good.
Yeah, so trauma, we're going to define trauma, not that you've had a traumatic experience, because if you live more than about 10 minutes in this world, you're going to have a traumatic experience, right? Your beloved pet is going to die. Someone that you care about is going to be injured or sick or pass or whatever. So we're going to have the bottom's going to fall out of the economy. You might lose your house. We all have traumatic experiences. What I'm talking about is what we would call diagnosable trauma, where the past is intruding into the present. So it feels like whatever that traumatic experience was, it's happening now. That's why for me, body memories were so abhorrent, not only because they're awful, but because it makes it feel like the event is happening now. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about trauma. So that's where hypervigilance comes from, right? Who is he coming? Is he coming? Is he, where is he? I remember I had a premonition once that I was going to punch somebody. I was known in early sobriety, I was known for punching. So because men would come up and tap me, whack, right? But I had this premonition and I said, don't hit him. And so all day I'm waiting for someone to come up and tap me on the shoulder, and someone does. Comes up and taps me who was a lovely man. We had passed the basket at the 12-step meeting, and he had a question. I can't remember what service commitment I had, but he had a question for me, and he didn't want to disturb the meeting, so he lightly tapped me on the shoulder, and I was ready to haul off. Fortunately, he was, going to have to get a crossbody, so he wouldn't have gotten hurt. If I'd had to, he would have really been injured. And I said, no, you had that premonition. Don't hit him.
So it's like a first.
Right, but it feels like that because it feels like, no, it's somebody who's going to hurt you. No, it's not. It's this lovely man who just had a question, probably had to get, I don't know, probably had to hand me a receipt or something, right? He just didn't want to. So that's what trauma is. So it pulls us, yanks us from the here and now into the past.
And that's what you call the triggers, because things happen and they trigger.
They trigger you. And that's why I call it, you just yanked into the past. So what we strive for is to be present. Now, the most effective way of being present are grounding exercises. And there are 2 things. Number 1 is put your feet on the ground and feel the here, and literally feel the here and now. If you can go outside and feel dirt or grass or sand or whatever, all the better. But feel, and I don't know if you see me wiggling, but my go-to is to pull my feet up underneath me. And so when I'm sort of wiggling here in the interview, you can't see it, but it's because I'm like, okay, no, I've pulled my feet back underneath me. No, you have to put them on the ground. Be here now. And that's one way. And we literally call it grounding exercises. The other is breath. So one of the pieces of research that I did is there's a lot of yoga that's at addiction treatment facilities, lots and lots of yoga. And I thought, I'm not seeing the outcomes at our facility that I would have hoped, because mostly sometimes you have to split the men and the women, because the men just fart the whole time and the women go to sleep and they don't want all the farting. Like, it's not all fart jokes for them. But so, a lot of times you have to split them up. So I was like, I'm not seeing the results, because what we generally hire in an addiction treatment center is some very bendy 20-something not even like 20, like 22-year-old who doesn't have an addiction problem, right? And it's like, okay, now we're going to do the thing that none of the people who are coming in can do because they're dope sick and they don't feel good and they haven't exercised in, years and all the things. And I was like, what is it about yoga that's so good? And what we found is it's not the positions at all, it's the breathing. And there's amazing research that's been done over decades out of India that's mostly discounted in the West because it came from India. Right? But breathing. So of course, I'm Jewish, so breath is life, right? You're alive when you breathe your first breath, and you're gone when you breathe your last breath, right? That's sort of the Jewish definition of when you're alive, is when you are breathing. It's all about the breath. And so if we can remember that, and I always say to people, I was like, as long as you're on this side of the dirt, like as long as you're breathing, then there's hope. Like we've got good treatment. People just don't know it. So if you really can breathe in, feel that expansion in your lungs, and then breathe out, and do that a few times, it helps to bring you into your body. It helps to bring you into. Now, to do that without having some somatic work too is going to have very limited results. But someone like me or you who's been through those kinds of therapeutics, who can be present when something wants to pull me back, I'm like, no, I'm here. I put my feet on the ground and I take a few breaths and I'm here.
Well, the other thing it says to me is you're conscious. You're so conscious of whatever is going on in your body now that you've gotten in touch with everything, so that you can identify when something's coming at you and that you can handle it. I had a traumatic childhood too, and I've been hyper vigilant also. I can so relate to what you're saying, So, okay, and then we're talking about the different effective therapies.
Yeah,
and that when some are used together, they have this synergistic effect, and I love this. So, please explain how, together with psychotherapy, that gets to the root cause of the addiction, other therapies together, and you're talking about breath work and other things, can be so extraordinary for the healing of trauma, addiction, all of that.
Sure. So the first book that I wrote it was an internet a #1 bestseller on Amazon, and it's called Ending Addiction for Good. We pulled it out of print because the treatment facility has been sold and they don't use this treatment model anymore, but it's available. And but the crux of the research is if you're at one of the most expensive treatment facilities in the world, you better be getting the best care. And so I was brought in as the director of research to find what are the best therapeutics that we can use in addition to psychotherapy, because we know the benefits and the limitations of different kinds of talk therapy. So what can we do in addition to that? Because listen, you can't sit around and talk about yourself all day long, and nor can you listen in group to everybody else. Because if that guy talks about his girlfriend one more time, you're going to rip his throat out. So yeah,
he's definitely not in the present. He's definitely living in the past.
Well, but that's what you are in the first 2 or 3 weeks of treatment. You are all in the problem, right? So what I did is I went around and we looked at these different things, and there are some things that I think it's unfortunate that I don't think insurance wants people to know about, or treatment centers don't want people to know about necessarily, because their business model is based on relapse, right? Oh, when you relapse, you can come back. That was not our business model at the treatment facility that I worked at. We figured that there are enough people with addiction problems that we never wanted to see you again. So what we did is first of all, we had long-term care. So people stayed in residential treatment for 90 to 120 days and then stepped down probably to, a structured sober living and outpatient. So you were really in a very structured environment for about a year. And what I did is I looked at what are these complementary therapies, and I want therapies that you can do and skills you can learn so that you don't have to keep paying. I want you to get sober and not be recovering. That's not what it says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says we are recovered. I feel like I'm basically in remission. I don't look at the world after 25 years. I don't look at the world as like I did when I was drinking. I still have some hallmarks of that. Still have some black and white thinking. I had some people over on the weekend, I think on Sunday, and I served Martinelli's. And then I don't know what possessed me, but I just picked up the bottle and wanted to just almost swigged it right out of the bottle, like in the, like when I was
old days.
16. Yeah, in the old days. And I was like, what? Like, okay. Like I don't do that when I don't drink out of the milk carton when they're not here. Right. Like I pour it in a glass. Like
but you know what I love about that? You didn't beat yourself up over it.
Oh no.
You've learned not to beat yourself up over it.
No, never. I thought it was hysterical. I was like, I guess I'm still an alcoholic. Because see, I know certain things about I don't want to drink like a normal person. People are like, could you drink like, have a glass of wine? I was like, maybe, but I don't have any desire. I didn't never like the taste. So I don't have any desire, and I don't lie to myself. Like when I've been in the hospital and they give me, Dilaudid, and they're like, well, you can't go as long as you're on the drip, on the button. I'm like looking at her, looking at the button, looking at her, for like a full minute. But I don't know. Maybe I want to stay here a little longer for a little button action, right? I know in my core, I just want to not face reality. But I also have enough experience to know that whatever problem I face, because there's a saying in 12 steps, life on life's terms. There are good times and there are bad times. I released a Jewish themed novel a week after the war in Israel started. The timing could not have been worse because people are like, well, you're baby killers. I'm like, I wrote about climate change. Like I'm a baby killer, like we don't have to go there, but I'm just saying that was very disappointing. Right?
Yeah, but now.
But I don't need that and to be drunk on top of it.
Right.
Because drunk on top of it used to be the solution, and now it's not.
But I want to go back to two things. What is this thing that you said, the trip that you were on,
Dilaudid, yeah.
What the heck is that?
It's a narcotic.
Okay.
Yeah,
and They give that to you? They give that to you?
I had surgery. So it's completely appropriate for people, even in recovery, in the hospital to have painkillers, post-surgically for a few days.
With your history, it was like, bring me more.
Well, they said I had to be off the drip for a certain number of hours before I could go home. And I was like, what? Because once it's in, then it's working.
Right.
I don't have to feel nothing.
Right.
But, and so these therapeutics together, they make it, what I've learned in recovery is I now know how to feel my feelings. And they are always going to change. I don't like to feel much. I don't want to feel real good. I don't want to feel real bad, and one of the things I learned through somatic experiencing is that I didn't know what my feelings were. And so, my somatic practitioner, should say, well, what's going on? I'd be like, something. Guys, I'm 45, 48 years old at this point, right? And I'm having to have someone, and a doctor, and I'm having to have someone identify what I'm feeling because I don't know. And what I found is, okay, it's hard for me to tolerate any of these feelings. But now I've learned, oh, you know what? They're going to go away anyway. They're going to go away anyway. And where it really hit me is I have these godchildren in Australia who I adore. I don't have any of my own kids by choice. I love being the auntie. Like, I was not made to have my own children. I'd love for them to go away and stop bothering me at a certain point because I want to do my work. My books come first. My research comes first. And that's not good.
It's really great that you're so accepting and real with yourself.
Absolutely.
Well, people are not like that. A lot aren't.
Yeah, but I know. But I love. There's these kids in my life who, I go to my friend's house
It's
over
sort of
here.
like being a grandmother. Let me tell you.
Well, it
I
is.
love being a grandmother.
It is, but it's like, I go to my friend's house and they yell, like tears, right? I'm like, hey, I'll hang out here for a little while,
Right.
you know, but I couldn't feel the love I had for them when I
Wow.
was in the room with them. But the minute I left, like to go back to the airport, I'm a disaster because I love them so much. And it came rushing in when it was safe, when I was alone. And I was like, I don't want that to be my life. I want to feel the love I have and express that love when I'm in the room with them.
Right.
And I
So
can
how
do
did you
that now.
accomplish that? How did the somatic
Somatics.
experiencing therapy
So there's
help
two.
you? And it takes out trauma, right? It helps remove trauma too.
So what we've understood, there's two things that you need to recover. And if you don't have these two things, then that's what we have to work on. The first is you have to have connection. There are all these studies, right? The focus of addiction treatment used to be on sobriety. You had to be sober, you had to be abstinent. But what we found is that when people have connections, recovery rates go up. Relapses get smaller, recovery rates go up when people can really trust and connect. Now, what keeps us from connection? That's very often trauma. And so what we've learned about trauma is that trauma gets trapped in the body. There's a wonderful book, The Body Keeps
That's
the
what
Score.
keeps getting triggered.
It's still there. So if you see a bird that has been attacked by a predator but gets away, it will go under a rock, in a bush, whatever, fluff up and shake, fluff up its feathers and shake. The shamans call that shaking medicine. This has been observed for thousands of years, but we don't use it very often in Western treatment. Somatic experiencing understands it. So the bird doesn't take the trauma with them. It passes through the body. The body keeps a score, and other somatic based information, Neo-Reichian information, really, if you want to look it up. It says that this gets trapped in here, and we need to move it through or shake it loose. So there's something called trauma release exercises, TRE, that is used in the Middle East actually quite a lot, to move, to shake out, to get an automatic shaking to move this through. I did something called Radical Aliveness. It's based out of Southern California, and it's also a Neo-Reichian type of therapeutic, and it is a little slower in terms of, because I was so, all the time, not present, dissociated. I mean, I basically lived the first 40 years of my life, or dissociated.
No, you were numbed out.
Yeah, and it helps you to connect. So they go really slow with me and say, okay, well, what are you feeling? But where I really got so much, because I started it before the pandemic, is I would fly down to Los Angeles and or Orange County and have sessions. And I remember once my flight was delayed, and I was so upset because I was going directly to the session and I missed part of my session. And my practitioner met me at the door and just enveloped me, and I just sobbed like I mean, like literally like snot in her sweater, like sobbing. And then I didn't need that anymore.
You released it.
It moves through, and that's the key. The other part of this is narrative. What we tell ourselves is true is true. So I'm not take it to crazy extremes of, if I tell myself and truly believe that I'm going to be a gold medal Olympic gymnast. All right, well, that's not true. Not because I couldn't take up gymnastics, but because Simone Biles is awesome and she's going to beat me. Right. So there are things that are, we can't just,
it's reality. Right.
It's not magic. But if you tell me that you can't get sober. And I get this all the time in treatment facilities. They're like, I can't do it, doc. It's too hard. Well, I did it, and I should have been dead by 25, guys. That's why I'm so happy now, because everything is everything is gravy at this point.
Well, it's
right?
so wonderful for you because you've done so much healing. You've come full circle.
So
And you found yourself finally.
Well, but I have the story. My stories are no longer limiting. My story is not that, I'm my father's daughter and I'm his toy and his plaything. And, I don't live for him. I live to help people who have suffered like I have. Like, that's what I do. That's why I write my books, because, so I have gotten to travel the world lecturing and learning with other people who study addiction and trauma and mental health issues is sort of in this realm, and practitioners. And I just came back from Ecuador, where a shaman taught me. He was like, do you want to know how to make, I talked about ayahuasca, and he's like, oh, did you want to know like what those plants are? We could show you how to make it. And I was like, I wouldn't use that, because I do research. I'm not a therapist of any kind. But who would have thought that this drunken kid, right, I did not know that I could say no for a long time, right? That this drunken kid could go all around the world learning about these therapeutics, and I try them on myself, because I want therapies that have little or no side effects.
Would you try ayahuasca, because I know people who are specializing in that modality? Mm-hmm. Would you be open to that?
To
ayahuasca or to?
Yeah, I don't need it. Am I open to it? I think it's good for people. I do. I think it's dangerous when people just fly off to South America and hope that the person that runs them through a ritual is legit. I find problematic. Mm-hmm. But I don't need it, because I've done this other work. But I want that. When I founded the Institute for Complementary and Indigenous Mental Health Research, I'm not an Indigenous person. I don't do Indigenous research. It would be inappropriate. But I wanted to make sure that those voices and those researchers have a seat at my table, that we are listening to them, because those worldviews are important, right? Because if you tell me, so one of the things, when I've traveled is traditional healers, shamans, traditional healers they look at me and they're like, oh, you're one of us. Like, even when I was like still drinking and like in college, like, oh, you're one of us. Because they saw how I would dissociate, and I would get other information, and I would, hear things that aren't there, right? See things that aren't there. That's crazy. Again, I'm using
not crazy.
But in our system, in our worldview, that's why I say our stories shape us. That's crazy. That's evil. That's what. If that's your worldview, then you act in a certain way. So Donald Trump has been indicted on 90 some odd charges. That's just a data point. There are some people, this illustrates my point. There are some people who then create a story around this. This is how our brains work. Our brains create stories, create a story around this, and they say he's persecuted. This is a witch hunt. People are trying to keep him from being the president again, blah, blah, blah. And they behave in one way because they've created that story. Other people take the exact same fact, the exact same data point. This person has been indicted. Nothing else, no judgment. That's just a fact. Like, my hair is black. That's just what it is. It's black because I dye it. That's how I know exactly what color it is, right? So, but some other people take that and they say, oh, if anyone's been indicted on that many charges and there's this much, evidence, and he, maybe he should be prosecuted to see what happens. That's what the legal system is. And if he's found guilty, should not be able to run again. Those people take the exact same piece of information and go very different directions. That's actually a neurological issue. And so that's how our brains work. And so that's why we have to change these stories. So if we can have connection, change our stories, and when we have diagnosable trauma, right, something that pulls us into the past, work that through somatically, then all these other things, music, singing in particular, or playing music also.
Too. I know you're very into that as a modality also.
Yeah, so singing is singing and playing music. And by the way, being bad at it is irrelevant. Your brain does not know if you are good or bad. That is your judgment. Probably someone else's judgment that you've just internalized, someone else's story that you've internalized. But your brain only knows that you're doing it, not that you're good or bad at it. So when I was newly sober, I would drive from where I lived in Beverly Hills all the way up the coast into Ventura County, up through Malibu into Ventura County, and I would sing. And I felt better. And we see this. No, if you have a bad day and you get stuck in traffic and you do your own carpool karaoke and you sing along to some song you like on the radio, you will feel better. That is a neurochemical response. Your body dumps serotonin, oxytocin, and dopamine when you sing. So you and I, right, if we have fairly normal brain physiology, and chemistry, we're going to go from here, oh, we're having a bad day, to here, and we're going to feel better when we sing or hum or anything.
Well, musical. As I was telling you before we started, I played the violin, and I had I had a lot of trauma in my childhood, and I can remember playing in the orchestra, and especially if it was a very dynamic piece of symphonic music, where I was with my bow and I would feel better. I would be able to lift myself up.
I don't know if you remember, but back in the 80s, there was, research done. There was all this heavy metal music is the devil's music, and it makes you angry and it makes you violent. But actually, the research showed the opposite. The research showed that people who listened to heavy metal music, hard rock music, were less violent, and were because they had a way of expressing those feelings. People who listen to very depressing music have a way of expressing those feelings. This is a little different when you sing. Or when you play music, it's a little bit different, and you are dumping these chemicals. Well, you and I are going to get just a little bump. But someone who's been using chemicals recently, their normal production of these feel-good chemicals, right? I don't want to use any technical words. The feel-good chemicals is in the basement. They're not producing it because they've been doing it externally. So then they sing, they are high. They get a huge hit. Well, imagine you get someone naturally high in a drug treatment program. They're going to come back to you all week. And when we do it in a group, choirs, right? When we do this in a group, we get more impact because then we get the connection. So people who were, at each other's throats in the session before now become friends. And they support each other in the work that they're doing.
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Tell me what else you would like everyone to know about what's new in your world.
So I am working on two projects right now. First is I just released, just a month ago, The Path to God's Promise. It is my novel about, it's a climate fiction novel about a Jewish woman who is called to be a prophet because God wants to warn us off about climate change and say, this is not my doing. Y'all need to fix this. And the reason I wrote this book is because I've been moving from addiction to trauma related to climate change, because as I travel, I see huge populations of people whose livelihoods and opportunity for livelihood is being wiped out. And what does that mean? And how do we deal with trauma on that kind of scale? So The Path to God's Promise is available everywhere books are sold.
Now, why did you choose a Jewish woman? Is she a stand-in for you?
No, not exactly. Write what you know. But I also wanted to go back to the Jewish understanding of prophecy, because a prophet is not a fortune teller. Like in Dungeons and Dragons, right? The prophecy is not what will come true. Prophecy in Torah, in Tanakh, in Jewish understanding is a warning. Jonah, is he the least effective prophet or the most effective prophet? Because the people listened to him. right? The prophecy is more like parenting than fortune telling. It says it's God saying, hey guys, you're off track. Don't put your hand on the stove. Don't put your hand on the stove. Don't put your hand on the stove. But when the kid puts his hand on the stove and gets burned, we don't say, ooh, parent, you knew what you were talking about. What a good fortune teller. No, we know that when you put your hand on the stove, you get burned. So that's what this is about, is saying, because I've heard a lot of a certain type of Christian group saying, well, if climate change is real, and there's a lot of debunk, it's not real, which at this point, I don't know how you can believe that. But if it's real, then it's God's will. And that was the point where I wanted to come and say, no, that's not how it works. There's this story about, the guy who's in a flood, and a guy comes out and says, hey, I'll take you out in my truck. And he said, no, I'm waiting for God. And then a guy comes in a boat and he says, no, I'm waiting for God. And then a guy comes in a helicopter when he's on his roof and he says, no, I'm waiting for God. And then he dies, he drowns. And when he goes up and to pearly gates, and
as we say in my world, as he transitions and he goes up and he gets his life to do.
Right. And God, and he says, God, I was waiting for you. And God's like, I sent a truck, a boat, and a helicopter. Like, we are responsible. And it's the same thing with addiction. It's the same thing with trauma. Our stories create our reality. If we believe that this is some hoax, and if it's not a hoax, it's God induced, well, then, have a piece of cake. Like, there's nothing, right? There's nothing to be done. I say, no, that's not true. That's not true for addiction. That's not true for trauma. That's not true for climate change. There are things we can do. And we just need to know what it is. So that's where I wrote The Path to God's Promise.
Wow. So that leads me right to questioning to you. Where can people find effective treatment? Because we're talking about healing long-term and complex trauma.
So most treatment is not readily available. And that's the thing. You've got to you're going to have to probably put something together yourself. You want to look for people who are not trying to sell you something, right? So like my book, Ending Addiction for Good, you're going to get that used, right? It's out of print. I don't make 1 penny. In fact, I actually didn't make a penny when it was still in print, right? Because I got paid for it up front. I didn't ever receive royalties. So, but you want someone who's not trying to sell you something, and especially an ongoing service. There should be an end date, even on therapy. Like I see someone regularly because she knows me and it's a check-in. There was a time where I talked to her every day, and now twice a month, sometimes once a month if I'm out of the country. It's to keep me honest, right? So you're going to have to look for that. Start with things that are easy for grounding exercises. You can learn them on YouTube. Breathing exercises, you can learn them on YouTube. Don't do things that trigger you. So like a lot of people with trauma close their eyes. Everything comes rushing in. Don't do those. If it hurts you in the first 2 seconds, don't do that. Right? So like for me, I couldn't do breath work, something literally called breath work. I could not do that modality for a long time until I had much more somatics. And then really, truly, if you have intrusions, somatic experiencing of one form or another is so, so important. I love acupuncture because I go to my guy tomorrow. Acupuncture is passive. All I have to do is show up and lay on the table and we're done, right? I don't have to do anything. So those types of
we're
activities.
Educating people. So we're telling people with acupuncture, most people think acupuncture is something that helps people physically, but it can also help emotionally.
Very much so. So there's something called Shen disturbance, like a spiritual disturbance. There is, in acupuncture, they have exorcism, right? There are all sorts of what we would call psychospiritual. It's a biopsychosocial. It helps physically, mentally, psychologically, and spiritually. So acupuncture is wonderful. If you can stand it, and not everybody can, massage can be very helpful. And there are types of therapeutic massage.
Some people don't want to be touched like that.
Some people don't want to be touched, and that's fine. I didn't for a long time, but again, once you can get through it's very important. Look though for connection. Whatever you do, you have to have support to do it.
So what if a person is really lost and they don't have that support?
So I think most people have more support than they realize. But when you're traumatized, you can't feel it and you don't trust it. So I work a lot with veterans, for example, and veterans will very often, and veterans still have horrific suicide rates. And what we try to impart is that it's a lie that you're telling yourself, that your mother, father, spouse, children, friends, those people around you don't want you, that you are a burden. That is a lie. If you were truly a burden, they wouldn't show up. If it was preferable, there's lots of people who walk away from all sorts of situations, right? If it was preferable to them not to have you in their lives, they would have walked away, and they haven't. So that's why whenever we have someone who's suicidal, and we can get, if we know they have like good relationship with, say, mom, we get mom on the line to tell them the truth. The truth is, I love you. So I had to test these things out, right? Because I didn't believe that people were going to show up for me, because that wasn't my experience, or that I'd be too much, but I have a friend who in Israel, who is a psychotherapist in Israel, and I had moved recently, and I did not have a psychotherapist here. And I was having a really hard time. It was before I found somatics. I was having a really hard time. And I texted him, and I was like, this is what's going on, and I'm having a hard time, and I haven't found a therapist yet. And he talked to me, I don't know, for a couple of weeks until I found someone. And I was like, that's so kind of you. Why did you do that? And he's like, because I'm your friend.
That's wonderful. So let's talk about that also. So you found the support you needed. You'll learn how to stay present in your body, even though you're so severely traumatized. And how does that lead you to joy? How does Constance find joy? Is it through those Australian children? Is it now that you can really feel that love? And in general, if a person does their work, how does that lead them to being able to feel that feeling?
Yeah, because I would say joy is transitory. Like, I'm not in a state of ecstasy all the time. But I'm not in a state of despair all the time either. I feel joy, I feel despair, I feel scared, I feel, all the things. I think what healing is to me is the being present for whatever it is that's going on. And sometimes that's wonderful, and sometimes it's not. But I'm here for it, and I get to be a human being, right? Because, we're all made of stardust. That's a literal fact. This is an illusion. This physical body is an illusion. It's mostly empty space.
It's sort of our vehicle.
Right. I'm sitting on a chair in pants, right? So some of the electrons from my backside are switching with the electrons in my pants and the electrons in the chair. So this is an illusion, a vehicle, is another way of looking at it. So I am here to have an experience. I can't have that experience if I'm numbed out. And so what gives me pleasure, when I turned 50, I did the 50 days before my 50th birthday, I gave myself some sort of treat every day. And sometimes it was a present. I bought myself little things that I had wanted. But mostly it was, I stopped working, even though I had to do whatever, and went for a walk. I picked blackberries off of the blackberry bushes near my mailbox. I live out in a rural area, and delighted in them straight from the blackberry bush. I had a peach. Just, delicious, cold and juicy
You
and
were feeling, you
delicious.
were tasting, you were.
So I let myself delight in these things. Like when my cat purrs,
That's
right?
beautiful.
Like those are the things. And I try not to, so I got to do that. I've continued that. I don't do it necessarily every day, but I remind myself to enjoy what is around me. I had some friends come over. So I've been a Girl Scout since I was 4 years old, lifetime member, all the things. And I know how to do, Girl Scouty things like make soap. So I had some friends over this last weekend to make soap. And I delight teaching them. I don't need soap. Like what you know,
No,
but I delight in teaching them. Or I went camping, and taught my friends who went with me how to make omelets in a Ziploc bag. So everybody gets the omelet that they want and they're boiling. All the people who weren't Girl Scouts are like, "Wow, you're incredible." I had a book signing in it near my hometown, and friends from high school came and were like, telling me, that how I inspired them. And I take in those
good
compliments.
for you. That's so good. That is so great. This podcast is all about turning trauma into healing and transformation. And you are a poster child for the mission of this podcast. I am so happy for you, Constance.
Well, I thank you. And I want to be the poster child because it means I'm helping someone else.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's great that I healed. But I still say to my somatic practitioner all the time, I'm like, I am still in awe that healing was possible, that I do not experience the intrusiveness of trauma anymore. It is as if it did not happen. And I can't believe it. That is like winning the lottery.
Lottery. I can identify with that. You have turned this into such a blessing.
Well, and I want other people to know that it's possible, right? I want you to know that you can do these things, and they're painful. Somatic experience is one of the most painful things because you got to feel everything that came. You got to feel it go out, and that's awful. But you're only going to feel it one more time,
Right.
not 40
Are
times
you
a day.
available to people, Constance, if they want to reach out
I'm not
to you?
I'm not a therapist, but if you go to my website, which is just constancescharff.com.
And we'll provide all the links and all of that.
Yeah, I do give referrals. I do try to help people as much as I can. That's why I say look for the people who aren't trying to sell you anything.
Right. But that's why I want them to know about you. I think that's great.
Yeah,
I just wanted to thank you because this is such a you're remarkable. And it's an unforgettable interview. And I know you're going to help a lot of people with this interview. And I hate to close, but we need to close.
We do, yeah.
Close by saying to everyone that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Now you'll be able to see Constance and connect with her. And as I like to say, to be continued. I want to really thank you, Constance. You're terrific.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And bye now for everyone. To be continued from my heart.